All right, it's a little bit after our scheduled start time of 7:30. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of Lakewood City Council. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you all again so much for coming tonight. We'll now have a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Anderson.
Present.
Bullock.
Here.
George. Here. Liddon.
Here.
O'Leary.
Here.
O'Malley.
Here.
Rader.
Here.
Reading and disposal of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held January 16, 2018.
Move to dispose without the necessity of a reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to dispose without the necessity of a reading? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 1, Committee of the Whole Report regarding committee meetings of 1/22/18 and 2/5/18.
Thank you. I'll note this evening that it is my intention to defer the report from this evening's meeting. That would be today, February 5th. There is a written report from the meeting held January 22nd, 2018, and we do have someone signed up to speak on this particular agenda item. So we'll now hear from Mr. Dilzell.
Hello. All right, great. My name's Dean Dilzell. I live at 1276 French Avenue. Just a couple of points I wanted to make. Number one has to do with scheduling of community meetings, including your cow meeting. I think it's obvious that the agenda of items that you need to work on will require regular meetings. And when you know you have a meeting next Monday, when you conclude tonight's meeting, it'd be nice if the schedule and the agenda for the meeting next week was posted a little earlier than Friday evening. And on another similar point, I wanted to take issue with the community planning meeting that was held in August 2015 and the amount of community engagement that was asked for there. There were three options. There was a commercial option, there was a retail option, and then there was the mixed-use option. And nobody there really wanted to make a commitment, so mixed-use came out on top that night. But if I'm not mistaken, the planning director that night said this is the beginning, this is the first of many more meetings that will be held to discuss this issue. There was never another meeting. So as far as full community engagement, I will take issue with the points that were made tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. I would note in response, I guess, to the first point with respect to scheduling committee of the whole meetings, it's definitely the case that we often have committee of the whole meetings on our off Mondays, the second and fourth Mondays of the month. However, that doesn't always hold true, and so we basically don't schedule them in a standing kind of way. And the other thing is that we frequently have to balance the needs of committee of the whole with our other committees that also need to meet and take up specific issues that were referred to those committees. And I'll attest, and you can believe me or not believe me on this point, but as a matter of fact, with committee of the whole meetings, we often have the schedule somewhat fluid throughout the prior week. And the reason for that is that we usually have a number of items that have been referred. We know we're not going to get to all of them, and we usually have some combination of schedules that we're trying to accommodate with the different directors, staff members, or members of the public that are going to be available to speak on those different issues. And so it's often the case that we have to do some juggling. I take your point generally and hope that, in the future maybe we can notice meetings earlier when when it's possible to do so. But I just know that from firsthand experience, there's often some flux that happens as far as the scheduling of the meetings goes. With respect to public engagement, I think that you do have to be mindful that there were many other meetings that have been scheduled and held on that issue. Certainly there were meetings held here in the public auditorium. There was a meeting held last fall as well at the library. So we've had, I think, a number of meetings, both here in the City Hall setting and also several outside in the community, as well as the one that you mentioned in the basement of the University of Akron Lakewood facility, and then elsewhere as well. And as we heard tonight, we'll continue to have those meetings going forward to make sure that we're hearing as much as we can through those those channels, but also through every other channel that we interact with the public and business owners in, including Facebook and email and social media. So thank you for those
Mr. Chairman, could I
comments.
respond to
Yes.
that point as well? In fact, in 2017, there were two well-attended public meetings in this room about the planning process that dealt with the Lakewood Hospital site. In, I think it was mid-February, there was a process that included several experts who had led conversations elsewhere in the city, particularly at the University Circle. Christopher Nain was here and shared his experience of the roadmap ahead in development. There were probably 80 to 100 citizens, perhaps more, I don't remember the exact count. And then also in July of this year, there was a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Architectural Board of Review in this room. Also 80 to 100 citizens here who were able to hear the two finalists and presenting their views and the conversation. So I don't know exactly what you mean when you say there have not been public conversations on this subject.
I will clarify
Thanks.
my meaning for you then. The point was.
Very briefly, but we do have
Very
to move
brief.
on.
I didn't even take but a minute, if that. The issue is, it had already been decided mixed-use development. Those meetings were just discussing the nature of that mixed use. As far as public involvement went with how the site would be developed, it was mixed use after August 15th, 2015. Public didn't get any feedback about what other options might be available. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on. We have our Committee of the Whole report, as I mentioned, from January 22nd, 2018. That is attached. I will not read it to be redundant, but refer your attention to it. We did take up Ordinance 3417 and Ordinance 3617 at that time, as well as a number of resolutions, and you'll hear more about them upcoming on the docket in just a moment. Move to receive and file that report.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 2, Ordinance 3417, an ordinance amending Section 110302, ZZ definitions outdoor seasonal dining facility in order to further clarify an outdoor dining space.
Thank you. Some will recall that this particular ordinance, 34-17, deals with a technical change in the ordinance to allow for more flexibility in outdoor dining space for our establishments. This was recommended for adoption, and I move to adopt this evening.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 3, Ordinance 3617, an ordinance amending various sections and enacting new chapters in order to further clarify and regulate parking plan review in the city.
Thank you. This ordinance 36-17 was also taken up in Committee of the Whole and recommended for full adoption. It clarifies that for submission of a parking plan to the city's Planning Commission, there will be a fee for the review involved in that plan. Move to adopt.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 4, Resolution 897618, a resolution appointing Ray Cushing to the Audit Committee. Please substitute.
Thank you. Move to substitute.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to substitute? I would note that the nature of this substitution is Mr. Cushing's name into the blank.
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilman Bullock.
Thank you. I'll just simply give a vote of confidence to Ray Cushing's work for several years now on the Audit Committee. I've had the pleasure of serving alongside him, and he's always been a very knowledgeable, incisive chair of the committee and member of the committee, and I think he brings a great deal to our deliberations, and I'm very happy to support his reappointment.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, all those, I'm sorry, we'll have to have a roll call vote on the motion to substitute.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
George? Yes. Litton?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley? Rader?
Yes.
Thank you. Move to adopt.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt as substituted? None. Madam Clerk?
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
George? Yes. Litton?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley? Rader?
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Item 5, Resolution 897718, a resolution appointing Michelle McHugh to the Audit Committee. Please substitute.
Move to substitute.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to substitute? Hearing none. I'm sorry.
Mr. President.
Councilman Bullock.
I'd be remiss in not also complimenting Michelle McHugh, who's served for a number of years also with, likewise, a very professional, knowledgeable perspective that she brings to the Audit Committee. We really are lucky to have, or blessed to have, yet again, another professional committee flush with talent, and not only talent, but people who are committed to serve. So, so she's among that number, and I'm also very happy to support her reappointment.
Thank you. Additional comments or discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk on substitution.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock? George? Yes. Litton?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Rader?
Yes.
Thank you. Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock? George? Yes. Litton?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Rader?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes.
Item 6, Resolution 897918, a resolution appointing Chris Bindle to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Please substitute.
Thank you. Move to substitute.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to substitute? I would just note that Mr. Bindle actually replaced myself on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I would also thank him and note his service to date, and look forward to his continued service to the community going forward.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilman O'Malley.
I believe Mr. Bindle's name is misspelled, and I believe there's only one L in his last name. If we could make that substitution. Move to
Yes, I believe that you're correct.
Mr.
And-
Chair?
Yes.
The ordinance, or the resolution has the name spelled correctly. It's just the face page of the docket that's got it misspelled.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Then I would suppose we don't need to substitute anything other than the substitution that was, sorry to have botched that one. We're still substituting by virtue of the insertion of the name. We do not need to further amend that. And we are at the motion to substitute, I believe, on this one. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock? George? Yes. Litton?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Rader?
Yes.
That motion passes. Move to adopt.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock? George? Yes. Litton?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Rader?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 7, Resolution 897818, a resolution appointing blank to the Board of Nuisance Abatement Appeals.
Move to defer.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 8, Resolution 898018, a resolution appointing blank to the Community Reinvestment Area Housing Council.
Move to defer.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer? Yes, Councilman Litton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to see if we knew, there was some confusion about this, both items 8 and 9, I think, as to if we actually had an appointment to make, or if our spreadsheet was accurate and inaccurate. Maybe we could get a clarification.
I believe so. If we do not have a clarification, well, I should just ask Director Butler, do we have the ability to clarify
Yes.
here and now this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chair,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
You do have appointments to make. The names that show up in the existing boards and commissions roster are the names of the folks you last appointed to those spots, and rather than remove them entirely, I've just left their names in there in the event that you were to reappoint them.
Okay, thank you for that.
You must appoint someone, whether it's them or someone else.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Appreciate it.
Any additional discussion or questions from council? Hearing none. All those in favor of deferral, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 9, Resolution 898118, a resolution appointing blank to the Community Reinvestment Area Housing Council.
Move to defer. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion to defer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 10, Resolution 898218, a resolution appointing council member blank to serve as ex officio member of the Foundation Planning Task Force.
Move to defer. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 11, Resolution 898318, a resolution appointing blank as the ex officio non-voting council member to the Lakewood Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board.
Move to defer. Second. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 12, Public Works Committee report regarding January 22nd, 2018 meeting.
Chairman Rader.
Thank you, Mr. President. On January 22nd, we met. All the members of the committee were present, and as was Director Benno. We went over just one item, and that was this, 897317, which is the resurfacing of a portion of Riverside Drive between West Clifton and Riverway Drive. This is a joint effort between ODOT and the city, and it qualifies at least for $221,000 in reimbursement from ODOT. I think we felt we were very satisfied with the answers we got from Director Benno. It seems like a pretty run-of-the-mill thing, and I'm also very impressed with how far ahead of the game we are on this. So I don't know if Director Benno is here today, but I want to thank him and the department for just being so, upfront about this and being so, on the ball, because the work doesn't even start till 2019. So kudos. So I would like to move to receive and file this report.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 13, Resolution 897317, a resolution to enter into an agreement which will allow the City of Lakewood to participate in the resurfacing of Riverside Drive.
Move to adopt. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 14, Housing Committee report regarding ordinances 218 and 318.
Thank you. Vice President Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. As was just mentioned, Housing Committee met and discussed two ordinances, 218 and 318. 218 to amend various parts of Section 1316, Property Maintenance and Safety Code. Specific conversation about light pollution, light trespass, complaints, current complaints, and efforts to improve the city's management of light trespass. The conversation was left at where there's an opportunity for members of council to learn more about this on their own, bring some ideas and thoughts to the administration, and further discussion on 218 will be scheduled. In regards to 318, Director Sylvester and the committee had a discussion regarding the history of the Birdtown infill project, which will bring this particular proposal, bring 4 new single-family homes to the Birdtown community. So Ordinance 318 requests council to approve the sale of 2 lots to Payne and Payne Builders, 2107 and 2111 Robin. The proposed sale comes at the end of a competitive RFQ process, and if approved, groundbreaking could take place this April with completion by September of 2018. An area that had 1 basically will now have 4 single-family homes, no tax abatement, no tax increment financing. I certainly appreciated Councilmember O'Malley's expressed support for this effort, and I appreciated Councilmember Rader's support as well. I thought it was a good conversation. A motion was entertained and passed to recommend council's approval of 318 upon 3rd reading, which I believe is this evening. Motion to receive and file this oral report.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file that oral report? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 15, ordinance 218, an ordinance amending various parts of Chapter 1306, Property Maintenance and Safety Code regarding light pollution.
Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 16, ordinance 318, an ordinance to enter into an agreement with Payne and Payne Custom Builders for the sale of 2107 and 2111 Robin Street pursuant to Section 15507 of the codified ordinances.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 17, liquor permit notice for a new D1 permit type 2 12301 Madison Avenue.
Thank you. This particular establishment, and in keeping with our custom, is in Councilman O'Malley's ward. We will defer rather to Councilman O'Malley as to this particular liquor license.
No objection.
Thank you. Move to recommend, move to submit the application without objection. Second. Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes, and that brings us to our new business.
Item 18, communication from Councilmember Rader and Council President O'Leary regarding resolution in support of county plastic bag fee ordinance.
Thank you. Councilman Rader.
Thank you, Mr. President. So tonight you'll find attached a resolution which strongly encourages the Honorable County Council of Cuyahoga County, Ohio, to adopt ordinance number O-2017-0006, a pollution control measure which creates a 10-cent bag fee charged for disposable bags at retailers. Supporting this countywide initiative is the best interest of our environment and Lakewood's residents' long-term health and well-being. So if we do pass this tonight, we'll be presenting it to Councilman Dale Miller, who is our councilman here. And I'd just like to add that this is just something that's really important to me, and I think it's very important and crucial to our environment. Lakewood particularly has 3.5 miles of coastline, if I'm not mistaken, and we also have about a mile of river line. And so protecting these resources is really incumbent upon us, and if we don't take care of it, then someone else isn't. So we need to make sure that we support these ordinances, and we strongly encourage the Cuyahoga County Council to take this up and to vote it in. And I think it'll be the best option possible right now, and the best thing going forward is to pass this and protect our environment. So Councilman O'Leary, would you have anything to add? And I really do appreciate the Council President's support on this, so thank you.
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity and bring this forward for our consideration this evening. I would just echo, I think aspirationally, the points about environmental protection here, and we know, I think, as many council members do, that a common complaint in Lakewood front yards is that there's some new plastic bag adorning the azaleas that was not originally intended to be planted there. And so, you know, I acknowledge that this is an issue that a lot of people in our community feel passionate about, both from the strictly speaking, the environmental perspective, and also the aesthetic and other impacts that these bags can generate for our neighborhoods that abut commercial districts. I also understand from Councilman Miller's comments published and recently made that it is likely that this iteration of the legislation would probably have to change to garner sufficient support to pass at the county council level. And I think that, you know, it's appropriate that we leave them to their legislative process and determine how best to move forward. But certainly I would support the objectives of this legislation. Thanks. Any additional comments or questions? I guess we have a motion and a second to receive and file the communication. Any additional comments or questions?
Mr. President.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to whether or not any of the parties that are in support of this, or at least co-sign this particular resolution, have any indication as to how many communities in Cuyahoga County that don't have automated bucket recycling pickup the way we have in Lakewood. And the question gets to the point that I know that the blue bags that we get from the grocery stores aren't intended to hold recycling materials, but I think that that's primarily what they've been used for many, many years. And for communities that might not have the automated pickup, and that there are perhaps 6, 7, or a dozen filled blue bags at the end of a driveway, I'm curious as to how a potential regressive tax on these types of bags might have a negative impact on the amount of recycled material collected in various communities in the county.
Well, I certainly don't have anything resembling a tally for that, and I know that Director Benno, who is potentially also an authority on all things related to automated recycling of, or automated collection of recyclables, is not here tonight either. But Councilman Rader, did you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a great question, Councilman Anderson. And I will speak to the regressive portion, because that was one of the things I was worried about, the most. When I heard about this first, was that people who can't afford even a 10-cent tax on a bag wouldn't be able to, it would hurt their bottom line, right? When you're having to decide between medication and food, paying an extra 10 cents just to get your food home on the bus is a challenge. So, but Councilman Miller told me personally, and I read the ordinance and it's in there, that anybody that's on food stamps basically will be exempt from this. And anybody who can prove that they have the cash out portion of the food stamps, which is food stamps without the card, would be exempt, making it less regressive. So I do take your point. I wanted to speak to that potential regressiveness.
Mr. President.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
I certainly appreciate the exchange. I would be, and again, it's a resolution, it's a non-binding resolution, but it does state the opinion of this council as a whole. I would be more willing to, possibly table the resolution to see what the final iteration of a piece of legislation that is proposed to be adopted by Cuyahoga County Council, as opposed to not quite knowing what this resolution is in support of. Just my 2 cents.
I can appreciate that concern. I think that, I think it is generally pretty clear what this resolution is in support of as drafted. I, again, appreciate the fact that it's not in its final iteration, or likely not in its final iteration to be passed, but I think that, what this resolution speaks to is again, the objectives of this piece of legislation. And, I, again, can understand concerns about unintended consequences of the legislation, and, and certainly not unreflective on those points. But I think, on balance, for me, it's something that I'm willing to support here tonight, but would obviously open the floor to everyone else on council for their 2 cents as well. Going to make the 10-cent pun joke there, but anyway, are there additional comments or questions from council on the motion to receive and file the communication?
Yeah, last point, Mr. President.
Yes, oh, sure, Vice President.
Again, and I appreciate the thoughts about the final iteration. We pretty much know what this is without seeing all the T's crossed and lowercase j's dotted. Again, my initial concern is about the potential negative impact on the collection of recyclable materials. So we'd be benefiting waterways, but possibly have a negative impact on the percentage of collected recyclable materials should communities not have the automated bucket pickup, and where residents are still using these smaller blue bags, and appropriately as it may be, but they're still using the small bags to sort of house their recycling materials for pickup. So I'm still just concerned about how that might negatively impact the overall recyclable collection in Cuyahoga County.
Thanks. I definitely, as I said, acknowledge that that's a concern, and it certainly not would be an outcome that I would support. So I hope that there would be a way to address that in its final iteration. I don't think that in general many of the folks who are supportive of this resolution, from an environmental perspective, would be supportive if they were convinced that that would be a major potential concern or unintended consequence. But I have to obviously profess that I haven't looked at that research myself.
So last point on
sure.
that. So the majority of Cuyahoga County Council is not in support of the current measure that we're looking to possibly add our collective voice to. So maybe it does show that the iteration might have a negative impact on overall recyclable collection if the majority of council isn't in support of the current iteration of the legislation. So maybe the fact that it doesn't have the majority is proving my point, that it might have some unintended consequences that have been vetted.
Thanks. I, am not aware of county council members who have raised that objection, but I also, again, could be incorrect on that point. And
I've not followed it either.
yeah, so I don't know what particular motivations might be drawn from the opposition of individual county council members. Thank you. Additional discussion? Yes, Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. President. And I appreciate the thoughtful discussion between council members here today. I support this idea, and I admire the leadership of our county councilman, and believe it's Councilwoman Sunny Simon from the east side who introduced this. In my view, Lakewood ought to show a little bit of leadership on this issue, as Councilman Rader and the council president are teaming up today to do. There are a number of operational questions still to work through, and the counties and the county councils in the midst of working through those. So affordability for people of limited means and logistics with vendors are going to be it. But we should be able to work through these, or the county should be able to work through these. I think they can if they want to, or given enough time to work through those things. They're not insurmountable obstacles. They just require some thoughtfulness. I think they've taken the right approach here too, which is countywide rather than just the city of Cleveland or just the city of Lakewood. That way, countywide, all vendors will, all stores, all commercial and retail places will have to deal with it and be on an even playing field, which is a helpful, constructive thing. I suspect in about 10 years' time, we'll look back on this and say, I don't remember why we ever had some of these bags. Just like if you look back, if you're old enough, which I kind of am, to remember pull-tab cans. Those used to be all over the parking lots everywhere, but no longer because the canning industry changed. People used to not wear seatbelts. When I grew up, we used to roll around in the back, way back with the tire iron and all kinds of hazardous things. You don't do that with your kids anymore. So I think that for health and for pollution, we ought to show some leadership in Lakewood and encourage the county leadership to work through the operational questions that remain, but we ought to get there. So I'm happy to support this tonight if there's such a motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions from council on the motion to receive and file the communication?
Mr. President.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
To Councilmember Bullock's point, I think that there are square footage requirements to where the current iteration of this legislation would require participation of the 10-cent collection, and I guess the money goes to the county. And I think that there are some exemptions based on square foot size. So I don't even know how the proposed legislation would impact Mark's versus Giant Eagle versus a new establishment in Ward 1 or the convenience stores on the corner. I don't know who this impacts and who it doesn't. So that's my only hesitation. I like the idea. I just don't know what the iteration is going to be considered by council and how it's going to impact individual merchants in Lakewood. So thank you for that.
Councilman Rader.
To speak to that just very briefly. Yeah, no, it's another great question, and it's something I've been following a little bit. The reason they put the square footage in, I forget the exact dimensions, but was to exempt the small drugstore, corner store, family-owned business that might actually be impacted negatively by this, and really focus on this larger retailers. Again, I'm not exactly sure in Lakewood what that breaks down to, and that's something I'd love to, get, in more detail as the process moves forward. But tonight, we're just, in my estimation, we're supporting this process. I like this piece of legislation personally, that's proposed in this form, but I know that it's probably going to end up in a different form, and I think supporting the idea of it is something that's very important. The Sierra Club estimated that 5 million pounds of plastic end up in our lake every single year. I think we can, as a county, we should be able to mitigate that a little bit by taking proactive steps like this. So I really appreciate the conversation and encourage my colleagues to support this. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions from council on the motion to receive and file? Yeah. It has been fun, but all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. And that motion passes.
Item 19, Resolution 898418, a resolution supporting the adoption of proposed ordinance 02-017-0006 by the County Council of Cuyahoga County, creating a 10-cent fee to be charged for disposable plastic bags.
Move to adopt?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion to adopt? I think we've had most of it out just recently on the motion to receive and file, but is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Aye. And that motion passes.
Item 20, communication from Councilmember George regarding Citizens Advisory Committee appointment, Michael Bentley.
Thank you. Councilwoman George.
Thank you. Colleagues, the purpose of this correspondence is to reflect my appointment of Michael Bentley of Lake Road to Citizens Advisory Committee. Mr. Bentley, he grew up in Lakewood, attended school here, and has a business in Lakewood as well. He has been an active member of the community, and I'm confident he'll bring his activism to his service in this capacity. It's my honor and privilege to appoint Mr. Bentley to this position, and I look forward to his contributions to our community in this role.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 21, communication from Councilmember O'Malley regarding resolution supporting the Ohio Fairness Act.
Councilmember O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear fellow council members, in 2016, Lakewood City Council passed Ordinance 116, which ensured non-discrimination protections in areas of education, housing, employment, and public accommodation. Such local action was needed because, unfortunately, neither federal or state government extends such protection to people based on sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. 19 other Ohio cities besides Lakewood already offer these protections, but it is a patchwork. You can literally work in one place, live in another, and lose your rights on your morning commute. Now the Ohio House of Representatives is considering House Bill 160, which would extend the protections we offer here in Lakewood statewide. The proposed bill has already received vocal support from many Lakewood residents and business owners. I'm asking Council to adopt the attached resolution expressing our support for these long overdue changes to state law sincerely.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. President. It's compelling image to think of living in one place, working in another, and having your rights not equally safeguarded on both ends of that. So I'm glad that I believe it's our own State Representative Nikki Antonio who introduced this in the State House, and I'm glad Councilman O'Malley is inviting us to support it. So happy to do so tonight.
Thank you. Other comments from council? I'd just add my thanks as well to Councilman O'Malley for bringing this forward to us. As is noted in your comments, this is something that Lakewood City Council made a priority to do in 2016, and that was arguably long overdue as well. And certainly these state protections are critical, and we hope that they'll become law all throughout the state of Ohio. Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Looking back on our process in 2016, I believe it was some of the most impactful and meaningful hearings that I've ever been part of here in city government, and certainly supported that process, our deliberation, and the final ordinance, and urged the state to do the same. But I also urge them to have the conversation, not just pass it. I really want them to learn about this, so fully support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments from council on the motion to receive and file? Hearing, sorry, Councilman O'Malley.
Just quickly to Councilman Anderson's point, this bill actually received a hearing last week, which was unthinkable at one point, that it would even get to that point. And there were a lot of people, including several Lakewood residents and business owners who provided both oral and written testimony last week. And this is also co-sponsored by several other representatives from Cuyahoga County and Northeast Ohio.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none, all those in favor of receiving and filing, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 22, Resolution 898518, a resolution supporting the Ohio Fairness Act.
Move to adopt.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 23, communication from Councilmember O'Malley regarding ordinance amending housing license requirements for condominium rental property.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Malley.
Thank you. Dear fellow council members, over the course of the last year, I've been included in conversations with city officials, residents, property managers about ways to improve our housing stock and ensure that rental properties in Lakewood remain consistent with our code standards. One particular area where our ordinances appear to fall short is in addressing condominium rentals. While non-owner occupied single-family homes, duplexes, and apartment buildings are licensed by each owner and placed on an inspection schedule, condominium rentals are not. The attached ordinance is designed to protect property owners and tenants alike by ensuring that condominium rentals are treated consistently with other rental properties in the city by requiring that each owner obtain a license and the property be periodically inspected. I look forward to hearing from such owners and other residents as council considers these changes. Please refer this ordinance to the Housing Committee for further consideration. Sincerely.
Thank you. Move to receive and file. Second. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Councilman Rader.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I've been to a couple of those meetings you've had, Dan, and I've also been to a couple of meetings of my own, and it's been a just recurring theme, and I think what you're proposing enjoys a lot of support, and a lot of people have been asking for it. So thank you again for your leadership on this, and I look forward to discussing this more in the Housing Committee.
Thanks. Additional comments or questions? Councilman Bullock.
I would like to preview the Housing Committee deliberation. Does either the planning director or the law director recall that far back why the structure is what it is and doesn't cover what the proposed ordinance from Councilman O'Malley would be? Is it because essentially condo law is its own section and its own animal, or was it an operational consideration by our staff to say that we are going to take these initial steps on 1 and 2 family structures and multifamilies and then get to the rest when we can get to the rest?
Law Director Butler.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I believe in 2010, when Ordinance 55-10, which substantially revised the housing license program in Lakewood, was introduced, we had already had a program in place that involved the inspection of condominium buildings, particularly centered on the Gold Coast. And I think that the residuary of that previous program made its way into Chapter 1306, Sections 43, 44, 45, that area, in the form of what you see being stricken in Councilman O'Malley's proposed ordinance. But those provisions really, as we've come to learn, don't fit well within the housing license scheme, because that is the only area in the code with respect to housing licenses that governs units that are not renter occupied. They're owner occupied. And somehow or another, owner occupied condominium units fell within this licensure scheme, and they really don't belong there because they are owner occupied. So this puts more of an emphasis on ensuring that the non-owner occupied condo units are the ones that we are inspecting and ensuring quality control on. I think that's the answer. I think there was a prior inspection program in place for non-owner occupied and owner occupied condominium units in Lakewood. Somehow or another, all of those got lumped into Ordinance 5510. which was ultimately adopted in May 2011. Why we didn't think to strike the non-owner occupied, or excuse me, the owner-occupied units from those provisions, I'm not sure.
Oh, thank you. Director Sylvester, were you going to chime in addition to that, or does that cover it?
That about wraps it up. I
Okay,
think.
thanks.
I mean, I would say the big trend, I think, is that there's probably more of them being rented out now. And of course, so the market's informing us a little bit too. But maybe in 2010, there weren't as many rentals as there are today. So I think it's an appropriate discussion to have based on what the marketplace is telling us.
Thanks. Yes, Councilman O'Malley?
Just to that point, there are some condominium buildings on the Gold Coast which are approaching, if not over, majority non-owner occupied, the units.
Thanks. And I would imagine for my part that certainly not within, say, the last 6 years or 7 years specifically, but in general, as these units have aged, there's probably naturally an increased need for inspection on that basis alone. All right, any other comments or questions from council members on the motion to receive and file that communication? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 24, Ordinance 1818, an ordinance amending Section 130643, Housing and Vacant Property License, and Section 130644, License Application Form and Fee, in order to update the code with respect to the regulation of condominium associations and unit owners in the city.
Move to refer to housing. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Housing Committee? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 25, communication from Mayor Summers regarding Keep Lakewood Beautiful board members.
Thank you. Mayor Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council, members of the audience. On behalf of the leadership of Keep Lakewood Beautiful, a very dedicated group of volunteer citizens who sponsor and help manage the adopt-a spots throughout the city. They have worked to solidify their membership for the future, and I'm pleased to announce that Carla Kowalowski, Tish Marshall, Melissa Meehan, Marianne Queesbarth, Joe Stolitza, Robert McCaleb, and Ruth Gillette will serve as the leadership of Keep Lakewood Beautiful. And as always, we're grateful for their dedicated contribution.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication. Second. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Just note that we all are familiar with the wonderful work that KLB does in our community to keep us looking sharp. And also, as this board does contain my mother as a member, I especially have to articulate my appreciation for the hard work that this board does throughout our city. Move to receive and file that communication. Second. John Ludden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to add, this was the first thing I think I ever got involved in the city of Lakewood, and it is a valuable part of our community. I think it was also something that used to be a city department, or at least it had a paid staff member that we've transitioned into being an all-volunteer group, and has still thrived and been able to do its work. So I think that's an example of government efficiency at its finest as well.
Thank you. And I will actually note, since we're on the topic, put in a plug. I believe it's our first or second meeting in March. I think that KLB has approached our clerk about the possibility of doing their annual presentation of the KLB Home Awards. And that's a fun evening and ceremony to be a part of for those who haven't attended yet. It's one of my favorites of the year, for sure. Lots of good looks at the more flattering sides of our neighborhoods. So, any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of receiving and filing say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 26, communication from Mayor Summers regarding NOPEC grant award documentation and acceptance.
Thank you. Mayor Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. As you might remember, on the January 10th meeting, I notified you of our success in getting a $216,474 grant from NOPEC. Attached is further information and a resolution that ultimately council will pass once we come to an agreement as to how we're going to spend this money. So I would ask that you add this to the initial letter to the committee. I can't recall where you actually referred it, but this is, I think, indication of some of the specific action that council must take to affirm your support and ultimately direction of the amounts of money which we have yet to determine.
Thank you. I would move to receive and file this communication. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file this communication? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 27, Resolution 898618, a resolution authorizing the city to take all actions necessary to accept Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council Energize Community Grant.
Thank you. As in keeping with the mayor's communication, it would be my intention to refer this to the committee to which the other matter was referred. Naturally, I'm blanking on which committee that was. I believe it was Committee of the Whole, unless it was Finance.
I'm pulling it up.
But I don't know. Does anyone else have a better recollection than I do on that one?
I'm looking at the minutes. Yeah, look at the minutes.
In the meantime, I guess while we wait, Director Pay, do you have a strong preference as to Finance Committee versus another committee?
Either Finance or Public Works would be appropriate.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was going to bring this up later, but since we have a little time. Is this money, it can only go for a certain number, a couple of different things. Do you have an idea of the range of things this money could be spent on?
Actually, I was looking for the communication, and it's not in what I sent to you, and I should send it to you. But basically, anything that creates the potential linkage to alternative energy sources, energy conservation are the broad categories, and I'm pretty sure we'll find some pretty good uses for it, just with those two major subjects, or maybe others as well.
Thank you. Councilman O'Malley.
The minutes state that the mayor's last communication at the January 16th meeting, that there was simply a motion to receive and file the communication.
Excellent. Well, with that helpful tidbit, okay. Well, I guess, as was mentioned, topically, this would fit into Finance or Public Works, or potentially Committee of the Whole, if that was council's desire on this one. Mayor, do we have a sense of how quickly the details might come together on this that would require us to?
No, that's not urgent. There's not a firm deadline here.
Okay.
I think if we can get it in the next 3 or 4 months, we'd probably do just fine.
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilman DeLoy.
I have the happy privilege of serving on both those committees, so in some ways should have no opinion. I think that operational questions involved in Public Works are going to be a big part of this discussion, so getting Director Benno right in the thick of this discussion may get us there more quickly. Two of the leading ideas are electric vehicle infrastructure. Another is potentially a test of a certain section of street for LED lights. Both of those are going to involve quite a lot of operational questions and interfacing with the utility company. I'll just signal to my colleagues in the administration, as you know, I've got a strong interest in all of that and some pretty clear sense that on electric vehicles we should be more ambitious than not. So I would like to have the chance to engage in this pretty actively. However, I understand that some good planning is happening through Director the Planning Department, and to fit the ideas that I'd like to bring to the table into a greater whole, it'd be good to get us all talking sooner than later. So, I guess I'd recommend that we pick a committee, not Committee of the Whole, since Committee of the Whole is so overloaded, and my own vote would be for the Public Works.
Okay. I certainly don't find fault with any of that rationale. Is there any other discussion from other council members as to a committee referral? All right. Hearing none, I guess I would move then that we refer to Public Works Committee. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Public Works? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 28, communication from Finance Director Pay regarding income tax ordinance amendments.
Thank you. Director Pay.
Thank you. Dear members of council, once again, municipalities in Ohio are faced with an impending deadline to make state-mandated changes to their municipal income tax code, this time due to changes made to Ohio Revised Code, Section 718.08, by the passage of House Bill 49. As usual, these changes were mandated without giving due consideration to municipal financial integrity. The first change moves the fourth quarter estimate due date for individuals from December 15th of the current year to January 15th of the following year, starting with tax year 2018. The second change further clarifies that the penalty for unpaid withholding tax is not to exceed 50% of the amount not paid timely. Please refer this to the Finance Committee for further discussion. And it's just important to note that these are changes that are being made at the state level that are significantly impacting municipalities' cash flow because of these due date changes. And we can talk more in committee about that.
Thanks. I'll definitely look forward to more discussion on those topics. And as has been noted, it's an ongoing theme with the current government in Columbus that municipalities are kind of always on the short end of the stick when it comes to finances generally, but particularly with these more kind of aggressive measures aimed at how we collect our taxes, when we collect our taxes. It's, as I said, an ongoing and troubling theme coming to us out of Columbus. I guess I would also ask, and this is probably one of the things that would bug you potentially as well, but having an estimate for the fourth quarter that's due in January of the following year, I mean, that's almost not really an estimate anymore at that point, is it? I mean, you have experienced the fourth quarter at that point.
Correct.
So, all right, thanks. I would, I guess, open up to any other discussion on this communication. Hearing none, move to receive and file. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 29, ordinance 418, an ordinance to adopt 128.22 through 128.2215 of the codified ordinances as mandated by the state legislature to authorize state officials to collect and administer municipal net profit taxes.
Thank you. Move to refer to Finance. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Finance Committee? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 30, communication from Law Director Butler regarding ordinance adding formerly chartered street establishment, naming, and vacation provision to the code following passage of the third amended charter.
Thank you. Law Director Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't read the communication verbatim, but merely commit it to your attention and ask that you refer the following ordinance, which places certain provisions with respect to the alteration, dedication, and vacation of streets in Lakewood into the Lakewood codified ordinances. And I'd ask that you refer the ordinance to an appropriate committee, such as Rules and Ordinances, which is considering similar measures as we speak.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 31, ordinance 518, an ordinance enacting section 13101 provisions, alteration, dedication, and vacation of streets, and 13102 Board of Revision of Assessments, and amending section 10711 notice of public hearing of the codified ordinances in order to codify certain provisions related to the establishment, naming, and vacation of streets.
Thank you. As Law Director Butler noted, there are a number of similar measures that have been referred to Rules and Ordinances, and we expect that there will be probably some additional measures beyond this one, and I think actually some of them are coming up on our docket that will also need to be addressed. So I would support a referral to Rules and Ordinances Committee if the chair is agreeable to that.
Yep, yeah, I'm agreeable.
Great. All right, so we have a motion and a second to refer to Rules and Ordinances. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 32, communication from Law Director Butler regarding ordinance revising Planning Commission voting requirements in the code following passage of the third amended charter.
Thank you. Law Director Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, with this ordinance that follows the communication, this is an ordinance that would codify a change necessary as a result of the passage of the third amended charter. And this has to do with the votes necessary in order to designate a property historic under the zoning code. As a result of the fact that it's a zoning code change, I would ask, even no matter how minor this change would be, I would ask that the ordinance be referred simultaneously to a committee of your choosing, as well as the Planning Commission for review. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file the communication? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 33, Ordinance 618, an ordinance amending Section 113403, procedures for identification, nomination, and designation of an HPD or HP of the codified ordinances of the city in order to adjust the voting requirements of the Planning Commission based upon its new composition under the third amended charter.
Thank you. Move to refer to Rules and Ordinances. Second. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Rules and Ordinances?
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilman Bullock.
I would like to take this time to thank Law Director Butler for the diligence and his high-quality caretaking of the charter and all of our ordinances. These are a series of statutes that will replace authority and functions that had been in the Second Amendment Charter, and it's something that we all rely on Kevin to do and probably take for granted when we should not. He does a very thorough job, and he's showing it once again here today. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. And in the spirit of that technical precision, I am remiss in my motion, despite the friendly reminder from Law Director Butler 90 seconds ago, that this motion should be to refer to Rules and Ordinances as well as Board of Zoning Appeals.
Planning.
And I'm sorry, to refer to Rules and Ordinances and Planning Commission. Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Councilman O'Malley? No? Okay.
Yeah, real quick, how does that work, Mr. President? When you refer something to two committees, will the Planning Commission make a recommendation to that committee? How does that work?
The referral is simultaneous. So Planning Commission could, if they, essentially depending on the scheduling of those meetings, Planning Commission could take it up and make a recommendation one way or the other prior to council's meeting or after council's meeting. You know, ideally, I guess it would be good to schedule council's meeting such that we can incorporate the feedback from Planning Commission. But essentially, those two bodies each have their own process to study this and then would report back to council. So, yeah, theoretically, you know, it's possible to have the two bodies in disagreement over a recommended change or have them, you know, reach unanimity in one order or the other. But I should say, Law Director Butler, is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds entirely accurate. This is such a minor change. Mr. President and Councilman Rader, the Planning Commission must, under our charter, hear all proposed changes to the zoning code. And because these changes fall within the zoning code, the Planning Commission's got to be able to weigh in. I suspect there's not going to be an issue. In the meantime, we know that the Rules and Ordinances Committee is meeting on these series of ordinances with respect to charter changes. So it makes sense just to refer them to both at the same time so that everyone gets an opportunity to weigh in.
Thanks. Okay, so I believe we have a motion and a second pending to refer to Rules and Ordinances and Planning Commission. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 34, communication from Finance Director Pay regarding 2018 bond anticipation notes in an amount not to exceed $32,287,000 and 2018 municipal capital lease in an amount not to exceed $1.5 million.
Thank you. Director Pay.
Thank you. Dear members of council, attached, please find the ordinances relating to the issuance of various purpose bond anticipation notes in the amount not to exceed $32.287 million used to finance capital improvement projects. The city will be paying the 2016 and 2017 issued one-year bond anticipation notes, also known as bands, for another one-year band in an amount not to exceed $21.687 million for projects that commenced in those years. The $10.6 million in new notes corresponds to the city's 2018 capital improvement program paid via bands and were discussed during the budget hearings and are listed in the correspondence. Also attached is an ordinance to enter into an agreement with a yet-to-be-named financial institution for municipal capital leases in an amount not to exceed approximately $1.5 million for the following capital equipment that is listed also in the correspondence. Please refer this legislation to Finance Committee for further review and discussion. Thank you. And also note that with the Finance Committee, we will invite as we have in past years, our bond counsel and our underwriter to come and talk further about these ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Law Director Butler, I just have a quick question. When we do get to the next portion of our docket here, which is the reading of the actual ordinances, I know that banks and investors can be a little persnickety about requirements, adhering to the requirements of the law. Are we able to suspend the rules and read those together, or do you prefer that we read them individually?
We are able to suspend the rules and read them together.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, then any additional discussion on the motion to receive and file the communication? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes. And I would, at this point, move that we read items 35 through 45 of our docket together.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules to allow for the collective reading of items 35 through 45. Is there any additional discussion on that motion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock? George?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Rader?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Item 35, ordinance 718, an ordinance not to exceed $21,687,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay costs of 2016 and 2007 issued one-year bond anticipation notes. Item 36, ordinance 818, an ordinance authorizing special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $160,000 for parking lot resurfacing. Item 37, ordinance 918, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $375,000 for police firing range. Item 38, ordinance 1018, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $375,000 for parks improvements. Item 39, ordinance 1118, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $475,000 for municipal building roof improvements. Item 40, ordinance 1218, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $700,000 for sidewalk improvements. Item 41, ordinance 1318, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $1,325,000 for Lakewood, for Lake Avenue improvements, Bell Avenue to West 117th. Item 42, ordinance 1418, an ordinance authorizing the special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $2,315,500 for water line replacements. Item 43, ordinance 1518, an ordinance authorizing special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $2,375,000 for sewer improvements. Item 44, ordinance 1618, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of special obligation income tax revenue notes not to exceed $2,500,000 for wastewater treatment plant digester improvements. Did he stay up? Well, one more. Item 45, ordinance 1718, an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to enter into equipment leases in forms approved by the Director of Law on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Move to refer to Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer items 35 through 45 on our docket to Finance Committee? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock? Litton, also known as George?
Yes.
Litton? O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley? Rader?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes, and that takes us to the end of our docket this evening. We do not have anyone signed up for public comment this evening. Are there any announcements from council members or from the administration? Yes, Mayor Summers.
Yeah, thank you, President O'Leary, members of council, members of the audience. I received an update from RTA regarding the continued growth of the Cleveland State Line, which is, of course, 55 running along Clifton. In 2014 was the first was base year before all the additions and improvements were made. This line was launched in December of that year, 2014, and from that date, December 2014, to the present date, the line has experienced a 45% increase in its service volume. And overwhelmingly, from the mid to the high 90s, the riders of this particular service line express very high levels of satisfaction in terms of operator safety, on-time performance, cleanliness, overall quality of service, and would they refer a family or friend to the Cleveland State Line. We know that mass transit in Ohio continues to be under siege, and we know that RTA is facing $20 million in loss of revenues from sales tax loss at the state level, and as a consequence, they're going to be paring down these services. This particular line will continue to be a very important one. However, I think the expectation is that there will be greater intervals between buses, fewer buses actually running, particularly at peak times. That's regretful, and it's a reminder of a great leap backward, particularly to something that is, by overwhelming standards, a very significant success. Our opportunity in the region is to understand these trends and to consider how we might combat them. And my sense is whatever we do, we're going to do locally here, that there's no sense of expectation in the near term from the state government, and I don't believe there's even less so at the federal level.
Thank you. Not always great news, but the good news is obviously that the line is very successful, as you mentioned, and we've benefited from a lot of the improvements that we've seen go in on that line, but certainly troubling that it would nonetheless face service reductions.
Mr. President.
Yes, Vice President Anderson.
Just on that report from the mayor, I'll just add my 2 cents as someone who uses the 26 and the 55 on a somewhat regular basis. I've certainly noticed an increase in ridership on the 55, all 3 of the lines that come through Lakewood. And, but it certainly is I find that the 55 is more commuter, you know, going downtown and back, around Cleveland State, around Public Square, and then back out to the west. 26 is a line that is more used by people who rely on public transportation on a daily basis, multiple times a day. I have a wife and 4 kids, and we have 1 car, so that's what requires me to take the 55 or the 26. But you know, more importantly, I think the 26 is utilized also. I see a lot more people with grocery bags just out of the grocery store taking the 26. I see a lot more students on the 26 because that's one of the more frequented buses for Cleveland Metropolitan School District students. High schoolers get fare on RTA. So it's interesting to see the 26 compared to the 55 in Lakewood, and I do think they do serve some overlapping of customers, but they do have some distinctions as well, and I think both of them are important as we consider all transportation needs and sort of predispositions when talking about RTA or other mass transit lines. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman George.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that update, Mayor. It is sad to see that we do have an increased utilization, but then it's dropping off, the number of buses available. Do we have a plan or something we can do to speak with RTA to see about keeping some of those lines, noting that there has been increased utilization?
Well, the lines are staying. The question is the number of buses, particularly during rush hour, that may expand the interval between buses. That's what's at stake here. So that puts some pressure on certainly the service integrity to those who have to get to certain places at certain times, like to work, or to a class for that matter. So the fact of the matter is this $20 million loss was patched together and deferred in 2018. Its full effect will show up in 2019. The real question is whether we can find as a region an alternative funding method. Sales tax is the primary tool that we passed regionally, and that rate has not changed. And since then, the state of Ohio continues to reduce its commitment to mass transit across the state. We actually rank, I think, 44th out of 50 states in terms of per capita funding of mass transit, and that trend has not improved. So until there's a mindset change in Columbus, it's a very difficult task, and I believe it's the responsibility of RTA and I think our county government to raise the question of county-wide transportation. We can continue to assert its importance to a community like Lakewood. I don't think there's any doubt at RTA's position as to, I think I failed to mention, there are over 600,000 folks who have used the Cleveland State line in the last really 1915, 16, and 73 years. So the question is not the need or the continued demonstration of support. Mass transit everywhere in the world is a subsidized business. Here in the United States, we subsidize it less. Other states do more. Actually, Pennsylvania significantly improves its subsidy, as does Michigan. And Ohio is just a state that continues to build highways and dedicates our federal highway funds towards that goal. And until we can get that changed, we're in a difficult spot.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. President, Mayor, could you repeat the figure? It was 40% increase or 40?
45% increase, 684,705 customers from the December 2014 to the present.
That's great. Yeah, as a general rule, you don't want to tax or cut innovation. In this case, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor, again for that update, and thanks to council members for the good discussion on that point. Any other announcements? Hearing none? Oh, I'm sorry, Vice President Hayes.
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all the great folks in Lakewood who planned and supported the community potluck, the diversity potluck from a few weeks ago. I know I attended with my family and we had a wonderful time. I met some good folks, and I know that there's some competition for some other things in Lakewood that evening. I think there was a pizza judging contest up at the Civic, but I just wanted to show my appreciation verbally for anyone who's watching out there, for my appreciation for that group. So, job well done.
Thank you. Any other business before council? Hearing none, move to adjourn.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Hearing none, again, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes. Thanks.